Hello, my name is Sean, and I'm a librarian here at GCC. I'm one of the OER librarians on campus, and today I have a presentation for you entitled OER You, A Beautiful Friendship. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about what is OER, how you can utilize it, and where you can find the OER resources that you can integrate into your class for both for the benefit of your students and yourself as an instructor. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin. And we're going to begin with this question of what is OER? And to this end, I found this great definition from the Creative Commons, which basically says that OER are educational materials that are shared at no cost with legal permissions for the public to freely use, share, and build upon the content. And what are we talking about when we say educational resources? Well, it can mean a wide variety of things. So often when we think of OER, we think of free textbooks. And of course, these are great, but OER can also encompass a wide variety of other educational resources such as quizzes, videos, handouts, lessons, and tutorials. So when we're thinking about educational resources and open educational resources, we really want to be holistic in our definition of what can constitute an educational resource. So that being said, going back to the definition of open educational resources, I highlighted two specific parts of that definition that really make up what is foundational for something to be not just an educational resource, but an open educational resource. And these two elements I've highlighted are this no-cost element and this element of freely using, sharing, and building upon content. Again, breaking that down, the two main factors that make an educational resource an open educational resource is this free concept or without cost, and this unrestricted concept, this open concept, which means we can utilize these resources without the limitations that you normally find in a proprietary textbook. And I want to break down these various factors here a little bit more and talking about why should we use OER? Why is OER a good thing for both our students and ourselves as instructors? And we're going to break it down by, again, those two elements we just talked about. And the first of those elements is that cost element. And I'd like to begin this conversation with a question for you, a little bit of trivia. So from 1977 to 2015, the overall inflation rate of the U.S. was 308%. How much did textbook costs rise in the same period? Consider it for a moment, perhaps even pause the video. And when you're ready, let's go ahead and move on. So during this same period in which inflation in the US rose 308%, textbook costs rose a staggering 1,041%. And these cost increases were higher than both medical care and new home price increases during the same period. So in a sense, textbook costs have really skyrocketed beyond even these, which we have known to have risen quite dramatically. But what is causing this massive and dramatic increase in the cost of textbooks? Well, there are three main factors. The first has to do with textbook monopolies. So often, textbook publishers have monopolies in the areas in which they publish. So the textbook landscape is often divided, where some textbook publishers will focus on science textbooks, others on maybe on humanities type resources. And so there's actually not a lot of competition going on in the textbook market that can drive some of these costs down. Now, the second major factor is students are essentially a captive audience. So in order to succeed in a class, they're basically required to purchase that textbook no matter what the cost, and in order to succeed in that class, and also graduate college and attain that life to which they aspire through their degree. And the third major factor, of course, is that professors actually decide which textbook to use. So often students don't get the choice of what textbook they want to use for a course, in which they might actually maybe prefer a cheaper or lower cost option. And so we as professors and instructors have a certain obligation to ensure that our students are able to afford their classes, their educational materials, and that's one of the reasons why OER is a great option. Now, going into that second factor, the restriction factor, or the lack of restrictions when it comes to OER, again, I'm going to start this conversation with a question. And this question is, in what ways can using proprietary educational materials be restricted for both instructors and students? Again, consider this question for a moment. Pause the video if you like. But Let's go ahead and move on. So there are a variety of ways in which proprietary educational materials can be restricted for students. Let's take a look at some examples. So in some cases, students may not get to keep the book that they end up purchasing for a class. Now this can be because of online textbooks in which they lose access after the course is completed or after they complete their studies at the college. It also can be the case in terms of rentals, because many students don't actually purchase textbooks, but merely rent them from semester to semester. So they're not actually able to keep these materials after they graduate or after the conclusion of a semester. Additionally, with another restriction is with print textbooks, you can't change the content of the book. So often you're stuck with however the textbook describes a particular subject or topic, and perhaps is the case where maybe you don't like their coverage of a particular topic in your discipline, or maybe you don't like, the way they don't go in depth enough into another aspect of a certain topic. So often you're restricted when it comes to maybe the textbook content itself, so you're not really able to change that. And a third major factor is often you cannot make physical media accessible online, even if you own it. And there's a variety of factors, I think, kind of in this category of the ways in which you're restricted at how you're going to actually use a textbook. Maybe transferring a physical page to like an online page, or vice versa, or distributing copies, other things like that may run afoul of copyright and some of those restrictions there. So a number of restrictions for, again, using some of the proprietary educational resources that you won't actually find in OER. So when we actually go back again to those two main factors, the free without cost and the unrestricted without limits factor, often when we think about how OER books are more open and less restrictive, we often come to what is often referred to as the 5 R's of OER. And these are ways in which OER books and resources tend to be much more open than their proprietary counterparts. And I want to kind of really break these 5 R's down because they're really critically important to understanding how we can utilize OER to our advantage for both our students and ourselves as instructors. So what are the 5 R's of OER? A bit of a tongue twister there. Well, there are 5 considerations, or R's, when considering OER. And these are the ability to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute OER content. And I really want to break these down so we get a thorough understanding of what exactly I'm talking about. Now, when it comes to the retain aspect of OER, this is basically the permission to make, own, and control copies of the content. So an example here, you find an OER textbook online, it can download a copy onto multiple devices and keep it forever without having to pay in a subscription. So again, this kind of goes right back to that restriction with the proprietary textbooks, where students aren't often able to maybe retain their textbook after their semester ends or after they graduate. With OER resources, students are actually able to download, keep those resources, and keep them forever without having to pay costs or additional fees. Now, in addition to the retain, we also have reuse. And this is the permission to use the content in a wide range of ways. So in a class, in a study group, on a website, in a video. So an example here is, I found an OER worksheet that really works well for my class. I can print copies and hand them out in class, or upload the handout to my Canvas course for students to download. Again, when we think about proprietary textbooks, there might be restrictions in how we're actually utilizing that resources, whether it's physical, online, the amount of copies we can distribute, all sorts of things that you don't actually see with more of these OER type resources. Next, we have the revise element, so the permission to adapt, adjust, modify, or alter the content itself. So a good example here, I found a great PDF of an OER textbook, but I need to reformat to be put in my Canvas course. And you can do that with OER. Maybe you find that great PDF of an OER textbook, maybe we're going to just copy and paste that text and put it into a Canvas page, or something like that. However we need to use it, we can basically use it in that way to reach our students. So whether that's copying and pasting stuff into a Canvas page, or maybe altering the format a little bit here and there, translating into different languages, all of that stuff is accessible and available through OER resources. And next we have remix, and this is one of the very powerful tools of OER resources that make them really advantageous for users and instructors. And essentially, remixing is the permission to combine the original or revised content with other material to create something new. So an example here is I found not one but two OER textbooks, and I wish to combine passages from each along with my own thoughts and ideas to make a super awesome OER textbook. So with OER, that's one of the things you're actually really able to do is actually change the textbook. Maybe typing in your own content for those topics which you're passionate about as an instructor, or maybe combining with another OER textbook because you like the way it covered a couple other different aspects in here. So you can kind of really combine a lot of these materials and revise and remix a lot of materials when it comes to OER, and that's a really great feature to have. And then finally, we have the redistribute R, which is the permission to share copies of the original content, your revisions, or your remixes with others. So an example here is, of course, you make that super awesome OER textbook, and you make it available to others to use, download, and remix themselves. And that's really one of the beautiful parts about OER, is the idea that you can always pay it forward and share your own OER content and your own OER textbooks that you develop to the benefit of other instructors, other students down the road. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms through in which you can do that through things such as the Maricopa Open Digital Press and Pressbooks and all of that as well as we go throughout this lesson. So at this point of the lesson, I also do want to talk a little bit about some of the difference between maybe free content versus open content. So there's a lot of materials and items that might actually be free to students, but not open or without restrictions. A couple examples here, open access journal articles, YouTube videos with some of the restrictive license, and even library resources. So of course these items are free to students, so you can always link to an article via the library or link to a library ebook or something like that. However, copyright restrictions, you're not actually able to maybe copy, paste, and change a lot of that content in your Canvas course. And so you are a bit restricted when it comes to those types of things. So should you use free content as opposed to OER? Well, you can absolutely use free content and OER. But really what you want to do is consider your goals. So if free is your goal, basically making a free class for your students, and so they can really, access all the educational materials they need without cost. So maybe you're going to use, in that case, library resources, open access resources, and OER resources to really make that course work. However, if more open materials is your goal, maybe you're going to stick with OER in this case, and that'll allow you to do some of these editing things, allow students to download these and keep them forever, and all of those different things that you might not have with some of the more free but more restrictive content. And either way, whether it is building just purely OER courses or courses that have free content from the library and OER and open access, us OER librarians are really here to help you throughout any of that. And we'll be willing to find, whatever content you need to make your courses successful. All right, so moving on, I want to talk a bit about OER licensing and the Creative Commons, because these actually create the backbone of how we can utilize OER resources and what we need to do in order to use those resources in our courses. So it's important to cover these, and we'll talk about them right now. But in order to do that, we need to back up just a little bit and talk about copyright, everyone's favorite topic. Now, what's important to note about copyright is you own the copyright to everything you publish, whether this is going to a formal publisher or publishing yourself on a website or something like that. Similarly, anything else someone publishes, they own. So if you basically put some creative or scholarly work out there, you own the copyright to that work. Now, copyright by default falls under what's called all rights reserved. And this means that creators have the sole right to sell, distribute, download, or alter their content that they've created. Now, this is really great, especially if maybe you're trying to write that next bestseller and you want to own the copyright to that work so you can reap the benefits of it. However, this can be restrictive for those who want people to more freely download, remix, and distribute their works. such as, the case with OER, where folks want to publish stuff that allows people to kind of use that more freely, download and distribute however they like, and even change and remix it as they need. So what is to be done in this situation? Well, that's where the Creative Commons really come to the rescue. Now, this is built on the existing copyright system, but it allows creators to more freely share their work to be remixed, distributed, and downloaded by others. So all those 5 R's we talked about before. And so really what the Creative Commons does is it gives creators the choice of whether they want their works to be more open and more accessible to folks. And so they can basically label these as different Creative Commons works, label them with the Creative Commons license, and allow folks to more openly use their materials. And so it basically gives authors the ability to retain some rights reserved as opposed to all rights reserved. And we'll talk about some of the rights in which creators are able to retain through some of these Creative Commons licenses. And because these allow for broader sharing, Creative Commons licenses really make up the backbone of OER licensing. So let's go ahead and talk then. Now we kind of defined the situation, the copyright, Creative Commons. I'm going to talk really specifically about Creative Commons licenses. And we see these right here. And what Creative Commons licenses do is basically alert you how you can utilize resources and in what ways you can utilize resources, and if there are any restrictions involved in your utilization of resources. For example, we have, and the licenses we have here are actually these 6 licenses to the left that you can see right here. And these licenses are composed of these 4 different elements here. So we have the attribution element, the no derivatives works element, the share alike element, and the non-commercial element here. And so all these different elements here make up the 6 licenses we have here, and there are various different combinations and derivations there. So in order to kind of really define, what is required of you whenever you use an OER item with one of these Creative Commons licenses, let's go ahead and break down what's required of basically each license. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Now, the first one is the least restrictive license, this Creative Commons Attribution or CC BY license. Now, for this one, all you need is attribution in order to use this content. And in order to use this content to also you can change the content, copy and paste it, download, redistribute it however you need it. So all you need to do is basically attribute where you got that information. And how do we attribute? An excellent question. Basically, you need 4 things for an attribution. You need the title of the work that you're using, the author or the creator of that work or that educational resource, the source from where you got it, and then also the license in which you got that work under. So we have a good example here of this. This is a educational resource, a Creative Commons resource right here, and I have this attribution for it right here at the bottom. And you'll notice all those things here. So we have the title, Creative Commons licenses explained by the author or creator, Macon East Library Project, and the license here, the CC BY Share Alike 3.0 license. And then you might be wondering, where's the source here? Well, you'll notice the title is linked here. So folks can just simply click on that to get to the source of where that content has been found originally. So that's basically the Creative Commons Attribution or BY license. Next, we have the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license, or the BY SA license here. Again, since we have that attribution element here, so we need that attribution here. That's what the BY element stands for. Additionally, we have this share alike element here. So basically, any changes shared under this must be shared under that same CC BY Share Alike license. So basically, if you create something new from the original OER item you had found, you have to basically share it under the same license, so that Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. So when you're putting a license on that own derivative work you've created, we're going to go ahead and have to, give that same license, that Share by SA license. Next, we have the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial license, or the CC BY NC license. Again, we have the attribution element, so we need to attribute it. Additionally, like if we create some sort of new derivative work from that original OER work, we actually can't sell it or use it commercially. So we're a little bit restricted on that. And so oftentimes people will put this on there because they want their work to be, shared and shared broadly, but people not to maybe take advantage of that and try to sell it and create it for more derivatives for more commercial purposes. Next, we have the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike license. So we've seen all these elements before, and basically these are used in kind of combination. So we have to, of course, attribute it through the BY license, can't sell it or use it commercially through that non-commercial license, and then any changes will be shared under that same CC BY NC-SA license. So to share alike license, so as any derivatives we make, we have to use this same license that we have here, that Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike license. All right, after that, we have something called the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Derivatives license. So again, that need the attribution here. But additionally, we can actually change the content. Now, if you see this license, this isn't actually technically an OER item that you found. Because you're not able to do some of those 5 Rs, those remixing, and some of those changing of the elements of that particular OER item. But you could with all the other licenses we had talked about before. Now, with a non-derivatives license item, if you do find one of those, you still are able to use it and use it often freely for students, and you're even able to maybe like copy a chapter or a section of that book and maybe paste it into your Canvas course or something like that. However, you're actually not able to change anything having it in that chapter itself. So you can't alter the text, you can't remix the text with anything else or anything of that nature. So you're restricted in those types of things. So you're not actually able to change it so that it loses its discrete identity. Now, after that, we have the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial and No Derivatives license. And again, combinations with the other ones we had previously talked about. So we need attributions to the BY part. Can't sell it commercially, that's the NC part. And again, can't change it through the non-derivatives part. And again, this would not necessarily be considered an OER item, but and most of the stuff you're going to find doesn't have that non-derivatives license, but there's something to be aware of there. Now, additionally, while this is not necessarily considered a formal Creative Commons license, you'll often see other things that are either called like a Creative Commons 0 or a public domain license from the Creative Commons. And what this basically means is that the item is in the public domain and there's actually no restrictions at all. So you don't even have to attribute. Might be a best practice, but you don't actually have to even do that. You can do whatever you want to it. And again, all those 5 Rs, changing, remixing, anything you really want. So, all right. So now that we talked a bit about some of the licensing, I want to talk about how you can find OER. So, places you can go to search for it, and some of the things you want to look for as you're searching and finding OER, so you can fully take advantage of it. Now, there's a couple places in which you can look. First, we have this OER guide here, and this is going to be the place where we're going to go today. And this has a list of all sorts of different and great resources from which you can actually find OER resources. Additionally, we have OER librarians and OER committees, so a lot of support where you can actually find help and assistance. We also have district resources here as well, and these are great, so always keep an eye out in your email. Often they'll have different programs, different training programs, and even some financial compensation available to folks to start OER initiatives and whatnot. But let's go ahead and jump to that OER guide, and I'm going to show you some places where you can look to find OER resources. Here we go. So here we go. Here's this OER at GCC page. Now, one of the things you're going to notice here is we have this reach out to OER librarians link here. So if you click on this, you'll actually be taken to a Google form where you can fill out some information, and you can set up basically a one-on-one appointment with an OER librarian to help you find some of the resources and materials you need to enter into your classes, some OER materials, whatever you need. Set up a one-on-one appointment with an OER librarian there. And we do have some other information here, like getting started, cover some of the stuff we talked about previously throughout this presentation. And we also have this using Creative Commons, also talked about that. But we also have this Find Open Textbooks link here. And this is a place where you can go to start finding OER resources you can integrate into your classes. Now, if you scroll down, you'll find a lot of really great content here, in which you can kind of start searching. So I'm going to take you through just a couple of these so you get an idea, what's out there. So first, let me take you through this OpenStax. So OpenStax is a really good OER publisher. They don't have a lot of OER textbooks out there, but the ones they do have are high quality, often peer reviewed, and updated fairly regularly. And you can scroll down through these and find a number of different OER textbooks that might work for a variety of different courses. So for instance, we have this great one here on US history. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and you're going to notice a couple things. So we notice, when it was originally published, when it was last updated, so 2022 in December. So that's pretty up to date, it seems like. As well, we see this license here, and this is just under this attribution license, so we know what we can do with it, and we know we need to attribute it, but after that we can do all we want with those 5 R's, changing, remixing, copying, pasting, downloading, redistributing, all that good stuff. So this is, again, kind of a link here, and I can click on View Online, and kind of go chapter by chapter, finding which sections, if I want to include the whole thing or maybe just a couple chapters here. So lots of options here. Additionally, let me go back here. So, and I could just go through those and start picking out what I need to use for the book, or I can even just start linking to those chapters as needed for my students, or even start copying and pasting into a Canvas page. Really, it's whatever you want. Now, in addition, a good part about this OpenStax is they also have instructor resources, so something to keep in mind when you're actually searching for OER. This one actually has Canvas course cartridges where I can upload a course cartridge into Canvas. It has other things such as PowerPoint slides, sample syllabuses, supplemental test questions. So a lot of content to really make your utilization of this as an OER textbook really helpful in the environment you're utilizing it in. Now, of course, like I mentioned before, this is just one of the resources available here. There's a couple others that I want to talk about. Now, one restriction, again, I mentioned before, the OpenStax doesn't have a lot of textbooks in there. The ones they have are high quality, but sometimes you're not going to find, maybe that topic or that class textbook you need in OpenStax. But we also have a Pressbook directory here. So while OpenStax might have just a couple dozen, Pressbook directories, looks like we're already up to 5,684 books. So this one's going to definitely be much more helpful and much more specific to all sorts of different topics. And again, to search, all we're going to do is we're going to type in whatever we want to, whatever class or whatever subject or discipline we're wanting to find some of these open textbooks in. So I'm going to just type in education there, as maybe that's what we want to have our OER textbook in. All right, and so we have a variety of different open textbooks that pop up here. So Introduction to Education, Graduate Research into Education, Igniting Your Teaching with Educational Technology, Introduction to Education. So lots of really great content, lots of really great stuff we have here. Lots of really great OER textbooks. So just like before, we're going to just click into this one. We're going to look down, see what we have as far as that Creative Commons license. This one's the Attribution Share Alike license. So again, we're able to utilize this, utilize it freely, do all those 5 R's, remixing, changing. We just have to be sure to attribute it and then share it under the same Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. And I can scroll down, start reading some of these chapters, see if it's something that's really working for my course and my students, and I can click into any of these, read through it, all those different things, see if that's really a great textbook for us. All right, so these are two great textbook sources in there. There's a couple other on this page. One thing that's important to know about the Pressbooks is we also have this Maricopa Open Digital Press. Now, this is actually for the Maricopa Community College District, and they do have some books here available in that same Pressbooks format. Looks like we're up to 28 across the district. Why I like to show this one off is because one of the good parts about OER, like I mentioned before when I talked about the redistribute R, is the idea that you can create an OER textbook of your own that you're able to share more broadly with both the Maricopa community and the world at large. And the Pressbooks directory is a way to do that. So you can actually get in touch with the CTLE. They can set you up with a Pressbooks account. Us OER librarians could also help facilitate some of that. But with this Pressbooks directory, you can actually start publishing open textbooks yourself and a Pressbook OER textbook yourself. And it is pretty intuitive and easy as you start getting into it. But this is a great way if you want to start creating OER in which you can do it. And I always like to mention too, you don't have to start with just a blank sheet. Sometimes you can also start with an OER textbook that is already created that you might actually start changing and manipulating and improving to meet the needs of your specific students and courses. Now, one of the things I also mentioned previously in the presentation is that OER isn't just textbooks. There's a variety of different types of OER. That might include like handouts, tutorials, presentations, all sorts of things like that. And to this end, we have a couple OER links that really specialize in a wide variety of different types of OER. So Pressbooks and OpenStax focused on more textbooks, but we also have this Mason OER Meta Finder and this Oasis that actually searches a wide variety of different educational resources that might include textbooks, but it might include a wide variety of other things as well. So I'm going to just type in another topic here. I'm just going to go philosophy. It's a good general topic here. And we have, all sorts of different stuff that come up. So we have open access books that would be good for like more of a textbook types of things. But I also have a couple other things. I have like podcasts here, learning objects, videos. So I'm going to click on this video option here. And I get, a variety of, OER and free materials that I can utilize as far as a video source or some other type of OER material that would be helpful for our students to learn and understand and grasp concepts from. All right. So going back to the presentation, and again, I always like to say us OER librarians are here to help you find these resources and materials. So you're not alone, but I just want to show you some of the places where you can start searching. So with that being said, now that I showed you where to find resources, how you might utilize OER, the licensing elements, I want to talk about some ways in which you can start utilizing OER and some strategies to really get you started. Now, so the first major strategy is just simply using one of these OER textbooks instead of one your students must pay for. So you'll notice in especially like Pressbooks directory, OpenStax, some of the others I shared with you there, they have, full textbooks that you might just simply be able to adopt and utilize as the textbook for your course. So that's definitely one option of the way to go. Now, a second option is maybe constructing a free OER textbook from the OER buffet. So making a curriculum out of maybe several OER sources. So maybe one textbook isn't covering all the things you need it to for your course, but maybe if you found two textbooks that basically if you puzzle them together, that makes, the perfect, OER textbook for you. That's something you can do is start picking and choosing and making a Frankenstein of, the best possible OER items that you can for a particular course and making them, in a sense, your course stronger for all these different diverse textbook sources that you're utilizing. Now, additionally, one of the things you can do, if just jumping into your course and starting with full OER is maybe a little task too daunting and a little bit more challenge that you want to take on in one semester, one of the things you can also do is start augmenting your course with OER, whether or not you're going to use a standard textbook in that semester. And this is a good way to maybe begin converting your course to eventual full OER if just jumping in head first is too daunting. So perhaps in maybe one semester you'll convert maybe half of your course, next semester you'll convert the other half, or maybe a third, or something like that. So essentially this is a way in which you can start building towards OER without having to necessarily jump full in at the start of a semester. Now, there's also this fourth option, creating OER and opening up your learning materials to the world. So, like I previously mentioned before, we have that open Pressbooks directory in which you can start, publishing OER yourself and start sharing that with the Maricopa community and the world. Additionally, simply giving Creative Commons designations and licensing to your lessons and materials is another way in which you can just start, opening up your materials to the world and making them OER. So simply, I know at the library in which I work, we have a lot of guides, flyers, tutorials, and right now we're just simply exploring just options from where can we actually just add a Creative Commons license to allow people to start utilizing, redistributing, maybe even remixing some of this content for the benefit of their students and instructors down the line. And finally, we have this fifth option. It's this open pedagogy option. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So open pedagogy essentially is the practice of engaging with students as creators of information rather than simply consumers of it. It's a form of experiential learning in which students demonstrate understanding through the act of creation. And the products of open pedagogy are student created and openly licensed so they may live outside of the classroom in a way that has an impact on the greater community. So examples of this might be having students write or improve textbook chapters for the class, have students contribute to citizen scientist initiatives, and have students complete wikis and websites giving information about lesson topics. So in a sense, empowering students to be creators of information and content, and also maybe utilizing some of their creativity to help with maybe some of the OER initiatives that you also are interested in. All right, so as far as next steps, I do also want to, of course, remind you that us OER librarians are here to help you find and select OER, make sense of OER licensing, help answer any questions you have. And so that's pretty much the conclusion of my presentation. But again, feel free to reach out to us if you need any help, any assistance, and us OER librarians are here to help. All right, so thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.